Namaste. Welcome to another edition of Navimas podcast. So today we are having one more podcast with Dr. Bijeet Prasantha. Bijeet da, namaste.
Namaskar.
Nah. Yes. So today, as you can see from our title of the podcast, we are going to talk about partitions, haunting shadows, enemy properties, a historical perspective. So I think a lot of Indians, I think most of us, even I knew something about it, but not a lot. I knew about an act called Enemy Properties Act and its implications, how it affects Hindus and Indians in general across the subcontinent, including people who are living in Bangladesh, people who are living in Pakistan and India. So as all you have seen, the news has flashed all over the national media, social media, print media, that there is a case which was going on in Madhya Pradesh High Court in Bhopal regarding the palaces of the Pataudi family. And now a verdict has come. It's not the final verdict. There would be a lot of legal challenges on that. But on the to the curious person who is thinking, what is an Properties Act and how it has shaped the subcontinent people, especially Hindus and Muslims, who were actually traveling, who did the migration in 1947 and also in 1971 during the Bangladesh War. So to talk about all these things, its impact, its social, economic impact, and how it shaped a lot of people's lives. So we have Dr. Bijeet Prasantha with us. So he will be giving us a historical perspective. So a lot of thing is covered in his book. The book is Hindu Nation, Hindu Genocide. So few other topics are covered in his book. So that's why we have him here. So he has done a lot of research on overall 1,000 years of history of Hindus in subcontinent. So taking his advantage of his knowledge and his expertise on the historical front. So we will start our discussion today. Vijitda?
Thank you. Namaskar.
Yes.
So in view of the recent news about Nawab Patodi, right, Saif Ali Khan, and their properties being attached by the quote unquote attached by the government of India. Um, this topic is trending in X. So we thought कि चलो थोड़ा सा एक intro दे देते हैं and let's talk for maybe an hour or so about the history of this Enemy Property Act, how it affected sort of the private properties in our subcontinent after partition, right? And also I want to start with a brief introduction about the this ancestry of this Nawab Patodi family, right? To give you a hunch how patriotic this family was, right? Obviously this was like Nawab family, a royal family, but we must start with the information about their history and which side they were on during the, let's say, the war with Marathas, right? In general, the Maratha Mughal war, and also during the partition of India, right? Um, so, so this guy Saif Ali Khan, his great grandfather was named Hamidullah Khan, and this guy he tried to, so he became a Nawab. He became the Nawab of Bhopal in 1947, and then he tried to merge Bhopal into the territory of Pakistan. Okay, and all these facts which we are going to sort of say here, they are sourced from Jinnah's letter collection in Lucknow AIML office, digitized and published in 1994 and 1995 by the government of Pakistan. And these publications were recommended for inclusion in the Memory of World Register. Okay. So anyway, Hamidullah Khan, the great grandfather of Saif Ali Khan, he became the Nawab of Bhopal in 1947. and he was a staunch supporter of Pakistan and Jinnah, and he governed Bhopal by Sharia. He wrote a letter inviting the king of Afghanistan to invade India. And on August the 2nd, 1947, um, um, as we can see from these documents, that this Nawab wrote a letter to Jinnah stating that, quote, I'm a staunch supporter of Pakistan. I want to march Bhopal in Pakistan. Hindus are untrustworthy, but Bhopal is 80% Hindu and surrounded by India. I am cut off. Hindus are intimidating me to join India. Basically, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was constantly telling him to join India. I know Pakistan has no means of helping me, but I want to know how much Pakistan can help me. I would never sign and join India, come what might. I will continue to serve Pakistan and Islam. Right? So this is the letter of Hamidullah Khan to Jinnah on 2nd of August 1947. And then what happened gradually was that, so the plan was like agreeing some part of Rajasthan, right, to sign this pact to join Pakistan by giving them some sort of appeasement and this sort of treatment. And once you get the sort of the corridor from, let's say, from the south of Punjab through Rajasthan, if you enter Bhopal, then all this area, right, a large chunk of Rajasthan as well as a large chunk of um, the current uh, day Madhya Pradesh will go to Pakistan. And if this sort of plan were implemented and successfully implemented, the fate of India would have been much more, I would say, um, bad, right, to say the least. Uh, and but Mewar, just like any other point in the history of India, uh, oppose this, right? They obviously, Mewar is a very staunch Hindu kingdom, and this time also they said that we are going to merge with India, and as a result, this dream of Nawab Hamidullah Khan got shattered, and as a result, Bhopal joined the Republic of India, like after everyone. Okay, they joined in 1949, I guess, after some brief brawl that happened in their some local residence in Delhi, right? And so um, this guy Hamidullah Khan joined even after the Nizam of Hyderabad. Okay. Now, what is the root of this dispute? So yeah, this controversy stems from Bhopal's Nawab Hamidullah Khan, who had three daughters, um, and out of them, um, Abida Sultan, she migrated to Pakistan in 1950. The second daughter, Sajida Sultan, stayed in India, and she married Nawab Iftikhar Ali Khan Patodi. And then, as a consequence, Sajida became the legal heir to the properties that we are talking and we are dealing with. I mean, the government of India is dealing with right now. Sajida's grandson is Saif Ali Khan, who inherited a large share of these properties. However, Abida Sultan's migration to Pakistan is the center of the government claim that these assets qualify as enemy property. In 2019, a court recognized Sajida Sultan, the second daughter of this Hamidullah Khan, as the rightful heir, but then the recent ruling has reignited a legal tussle, because I think this enemy property, India also have an enemy property act. And this was, I think, retrospectively changed in 2017, I believe. Right. Enemy Property Act was amended in 2017, um, and under Kiran Rijiju, during this Modi government, right? The bill was, I think, proposed in 2016, and the measure seeks to replace an ordinance promulgated to this effect on 7th of January 2016. Okay. And the first time the Enemy Property Act was introduced in 1968 in the Parliament of India as a response to the Enemy Property Act introduced in Pakistan in 1965 during the India-Pakistan War. Um, right. And hmm,
Vijit, just one question for the
right.
audience to actually get an understanding. So when
Sure.
partition happened in 1947, correct? So we know a lot of people, Muslims, who went to Pakistan, a lot of Hindus from East Pakistan and West Pakistan came to India. So just give us a little bit of overview what happened in 1947 when this migration happened and how the properties were actually handled by both India, West and East Pakistan. To give a context to the discussion.
Sure. Sure. So this is basically the topic of our discussion from now on. Okay. So as we know, when partition happened, large share of Hindus, right, they turned into Zimmis overnight in their own holy land of Bharatvarsha, which became Pakistan, right? And according to like there are some statistics by Hiranmoy Banerjee, for example, who quoted that in Bengal itself, around 2.5 million people became Udvastu, became refugee in the East Pakistan side. And then yeah, then what happened, for example, in places like Dhaka, right? Dhaka had a population of around 2 lakh. Um, it was the biggest city in the East Pakistan. And almost 70%, 1.4 lakh people were Hindu. And they owned 80% of all the properties and houses there. And then within a couple of weeks only, there were only 500 Hindus left there, and rest of them at like 1.4 lakh Hindus were evicted forcefully from Dhaka, right? And probably this was even a bigger exodus than the Kashmiri Hindu exodus in 1990. And then what happened was that they were in transit to trains and steamers with their valuables like gold, silver, money, utensils of like bronze or brass, right? And then these Hindus, when they were coming, they became easy prey and subjected to loot, murders. And Pakistani police were either mute spectators or they sort of assisted in those crimes, right? So I'm just trying to portray a picture what was going on right after 1947. And in this pretext, when Hindus started to move out of the Pakistan and started to came into either Bengal or to Punjab and Delhi, then the government of Pakistan, who were ruling both East and West Pakistan, they came up with this act called Emergency Requisition of Property Act 1948, right? And in this act, what Pakistan was basically trying to implement, and I'm quoting the act, it's a part of this act itself. And it says, quote, under this act, the notice under section 3 is served upon the owner of the land, and pursuant to that advance and or partial compensation is paid, and the possession of the land is taken over by the government and given it to the required body. The owner of the land requisitioned will lose all his right over the land, serve the right to have compensation, cannot question the manner of use. So basically, this act, Emergency Requisition of Property Act 1948, this act was saying कि the government can sort of snatch away your property and give you some compensation, but it is not guaranteed. But once the takeover is complete by the government, you cannot question the decision of the government. Okay. And And yeah, so after that, they brought some another section, section 5.7 of the same act, where they said that the right, title, and interest, if any of the owners are extinguished, and preparation of khotian or payment of rent does not improve the position of the original owners in respect to acquired land. Okay, so it is again reinforcing the fact ki if the title of the owner, right, once the property is being snatched away, you cannot sort of even go to court, and there is no sense of original owner of that land. Okay, so it's basically it is the complete extinction of the record, right, that you were ever a owner of that land. um, you may find this act being an accomplice in again Jati Bidwans, right? Uh, and yeah, so once this sort of law was implemented in 1948 in Pakistan, the Muslim community obviously understood the vile tactics and the intention of the Pakistani government to snatch away Hindu properties by force. Right? They stopped buying properties from the Hindus. They did not need to do it because the government was helping them, right, to snatch away the property. Right? So Muslims started to boycott Hindu traders, intimidate Hindus with Darka Mahal, so much so that Hindus started to leave the Pakistan. Anandabazar Patrika quoted the Chief Minister of Bengal, the then Chief Minister, Birhan Chandra Roy, that around 15 lakh Hindu Bengalis left East Pakistan around October 1948 itself. Suresh Chandra Banerjee, a Congress leader, quoted the number to be 20 lakh. Okay. And Anandabazar Patrika, they quoted several reasons for this mass Hindu exodus, which were like boycott of Hindu traders, forcible searches of Hindu houses without warrants, arrest of Hindus without trial, forceful requisition of Hindu properties. Okay, so all the sort of reasons that Anandabazar Patrika listed down at that point. One of the reason was this forceful requisition of Hindu properties through the act, right? And obviously, I mean, along with it, Pakistan created an atmosphere, an environment where there was huge food crisis and in general an economic crisis at that time, right? Which also forced a large section of upper, quote unquote, upper class Bengalis to sort of quit Bangladesh or East Pakistan and come to Kolkata, right? And you can understand, like, this was an act which basically took away land of the native people of that land, right, who have been living in that in those islands or in some really fertile parts of Bangladesh for thousands of years, right? And yeah, so with the tacit support of Pakistani deep state, Hindus were being murdered and thrown into the rivers without mercy. There were active attempts to delegitimize the Hindu and other minority leaders, just as is happening now, and imprison them with unsubstantiated allegations and charges such as keeping Gandhiji's poster, espionage, etc. Right? So basically, Pakistan Awam, as well as the Pakistani deep state and the administration and police, they try to portray that Hindus are basically acting as espionage of Bharat, um, and Hindus cannot be trusted. First of all, they need to sort of escape. We have to, like, Muslim needed to evict the Hindus, and once Hindus are leaving the place, they cannot even sell. They could not sell their properties, right? Because first of all, they were being intimidated, and no Muslim will buy it because they know there is an emergency requisition act being implemented. So they are anyway going to get those properties from the government, and they don't need to waste extra money to sort of buy those properties, right? They are going to get it in a month or so anyway. And so this went to such an extent, and this jihadi mob got so encouraged by this act that on 10th of December 1949, they attacked the Putia Hindu Rajwadi and took possession of it illegally. Okay. And then obviously the same thing was happening in Khulna, and Hindus in Khulna were subjected to loots, killings, and forcible conversions. Okay, and other kind of atrocities on women and children. Okay. Now, in the context of this Property Requisition Act, Emergency Requisition of Property Act on 1948, and the sort of genocide Jati Vidwans that was going on uh, from 1948, at least from 1947-48 till 1950, finally Congress opened their eyes when there was a brutal sort of massacre. Well, I mean, some part of some riot that happened um, on, I think, 1950s, right? And then they started to understand. So some riots started to take place in Bihar, near Bihar, and then it sort of steered Nehru and the Congress to sort of protect the minorities in both the countries. Okay, so Nehru started to take responsibility and started to think about it only when Muslims started to be attacked near Bihar and different parts of India. Right. So on March 1950, right. So on March 1950, Nehru signed a Nehru Liaquat Pact. So basically, a pact between India and Pakistan to protect their respective minorities, right? And on 2nd of March 1950, the Union Minister of Refugee Rehabilitation, Mohanlal Saxena, convened a meeting in Writers Building in Kolkata with the representatives of West Bengal, Assam, Tripura, Bihar and Odisha. The famous scientist Meghnad Saha was also present in that meeting. And then the Minister of Refugee Rehabilitation, Mohan Saxena, presented some staggeringly anti-Hindu proposals, such as pre 1950 refugees were to be distinguished from the post 1950 refugees. Point two, the government of India will provide rehabilitation to pre 1950 refugees only. The post 1950 refugees will get only relief and no rehabilitation. Point three, the Punjab model of population exchange, which was basically the brutal form, right? The very physical form of population exchange, where Punjab evicted India side of Punjab evicted all the Muslim to the Pakistan side. And now I think there is only 2 to 3% Muslim population in Punjab. So the Punjab model of population exchange will be halted because, in Nehru's words, this policy was completely adverse to India's political, social, and spiritual values. Right. So by distinguishing the pre 1950 refugees from the post 1950 refugees, and by not giving the post 1950 refugees any rehabilitation, um, the government of India sort of guaranteed that the Hindus that still were in both side of Pakistan either will be converted or killed, um, or uh, or will leave to, I don't know, some place, right? But they could not come to India because India was not providing rehabilitation. So the government of India's
Yeah,
logic was,
just
just a
one.
second,
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm,
one sentence. So
mhm.
by so basically government of India was giving the logic that if the Hindus of Pakistan are not coming to India, then Pakistan will take care of these minority population of Hindus, and it will act as a bargaining chip to sort of bargaining chip to ensure the protection of Muslims in India. I mean, how stupid was that logic? Just imagine. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, actually, I wanted just one more thing. See, this logic that is talked about, I think in 1949 or something, the Hudud Ordinance was passed in Pakistan Parliament, Hudud Ordinance, which actually made Hindus or non-Muslims as a same class citizens itself.
Right,
So
right.
the logic itself is very flawed because after Pakistan had this constitution, they had actually inserted the Hudud ordinance, which actually made sure that it was an Islamic state rather than a secular state. So how Nehru or the Indian government think that an Islamic state could take care of its non-Muslim minorities, where Bharat was a secular state. So don't know where the logic comes from. Thank you.
Exactly. I mean, just by doing this, all Nehru did, I think he knew it very well, that all the Hindu refugees, or not even refugees, all the Hindus of both sides of Pakistan will either be converted or killed, or they had the third option to sort of flee and come to India. By halting that, I mean, Islam gives you three options: either flee if you have got a chance, or you convert, or you die. But by halting that exodus, right, of Hindus from Pakistan to India, Nehru ensured that either the Hindus in Pakistan will convert or die. And yeah, so it was a stupid proposition, and
Yeah,
neither
just
Meghnad Saha.
one more question. One more question. So you mentioned that in after 1965 war, the Enemy Properties Act was actually passed in India.
1968, yes.
No, yeah, after 65 war, it came about.
And in 1965 it was enacted in Pakistan. So this
Hmm.
Emergency Requisition Property Act became Enemy Property Act in 1965. That led to
So
another slew of
Um, yeah, yeah.
genocides.
So just want to understand. So when in 1947, when the partition happened and the population exchange happened in at least in West India, in Punjab region. So at that time in Pakistan and in India, was there any act or any law which actually governed like the Muslims who are going to Pakistan, the Hindus who are coming to India? Any act was there to actually take care of the populace who were leaving behind?
There was an act by the British. I am forgetting
Hmm.
it. I have to search.
Hmm.
It's called. There was an act. Yeah, Transfer of Property Act 1882. So, this Transfer of Property Act 1882 was an Indian legislation which regulates the transfer of property in India. And according to this, transfer of property meant an act by which a person conveys the property to one or more person. Um, and there was an act by Dalhousie, I guess, which said that if a king or a nawab is childless, or I think without a son, then the property will basically go to the British. So that sort of, it's called Dalhousie's. Yeah, it was implemented by Lord Dalhousie. That much I know. I forget the exact name of the act, but this was one of the pretext in which the Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, she sort of fought, and I think Tatia Topi as well. In 1857, they fought with the British. This was one of the reasons that they got agitated, right? Um, right. So, and then, yeah, right. So there, which, so to your question, there existed a couple of laws that sort of, but they were not enemy property, right? I mean, British could not name it Enemy Property Act, or they were basically Urgent Requisition of Property Act. That was then sort of gentrified at the hand of, quote unquote, gentrified at the hand of Pakistan, and then it got the name Enemy Property Act in 1965 by Pakistan. And in response, India also came up with Enemy Property Act in 1968. Um, right. And ownership in the Indian context, it is passed to the custodian of enemy property in India, which is again a government department. Okay. Right. And so we were discussing the Nehru Liaquat Pact. Right. And then in spite of in spite of the vehement protest by Dr. Meghnad Saha, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, and KC Niyogi, Prime Minister Nehru signed that pact on 8th of April 1950. Shama Prasad Mukherjee and KC Niyogi were the cabinet ministers at that time, and in protest they resigned. Yet Jawaharlal Nehru remained adamant on this naive policy, which was clearly anti-Hindu, with the pretension of being pious and having full hope and faith in human goodness, right? And yeah, so basically it then this act in this Nehru Liaquat Pact ensured absolute physical rights and security of Muslims in West Bengal, while making Hindus of East Bengal doubly insecure. They became aware now that neither the Pakistani Ashrafs nor the centrist, secular, Hindu Wadi Congress was interested in taking up their issues and concerns. Minority rights in Pakistan was anyway a joke, and no one knew it more than the minority Hindu community of the East Pakistan, at least, right? Um, yeah, and then I wanted to quickly quote, I think Tathagata Roy, and he commented in his book, "My People
My pe
Uprooted," I guess,
uprooted.
and there he commented that one can hardly imagine the extent of moral breakdown of East Bengal non-Muslims today. They have lost all faith in themselves and in their future. So this is actually Tathagata Roy quoting Samar Guha, um, who wrote at the time of 1950 after the Nehru Liaquat Pact, right? So Samar Guha writes that they have lost all faith in themselves in their future, means the Bengali Hindu in East Pakistan, so much frightened and demoralized they have become that very few of them now possess a tinge of courage to protest against the misbehavior of even a Muslim coolie or a rickshawala. In his terrorized mind, a non Muslim today considers any Muslim as his master. Hindus have already begun to abandon their traditional customs, habits, and dresses. So, Nehru Liaquat Pact, in conjunction with this Emergency Requisition of Property Act, it made Hindus a second class citizen, or even worse, and it paved the way of rampant religious conversion, right, to Islam. And so yeah, so uh, after after that, I mean, this Emergency Requisition of Property Act 1948, it was, I think, modified at least 14 times, as per my record in my book History of Hindu Myths and Hindu Genocides. So, for example, in 1914, because it was important to Pakistanis, right, to Pakistani administration to sort of capture all the properties that Hindus had by hook or by crook. So they continuously modified this at least 14 times since 1948. For example, in 1949, it got the name the East Bengal Evacuees Administration of Property Act. In 1951, first it became the East Bengal Evacuees Restoration of Possession Act, and then it became in 1951 itself the East Bengal Evacuees Administration of Immovable Property Act. In 1952, it became East Bengal Prevention of Transfer of Property and Removal of Documents and Records Act. So they wanted to ensure the complete genocide, right, of even records and everything. And then it again got modified 1957, 1964, 1965. It got modified three times. In 1966, after that, 1969, 72, 74. In 74, it got modified twice. Okay. It got modified, or new act was added. So this Enemy Property Act was a renewed version of the Requisition of Property Act. Nonetheless, I am again repeating this in the context of Indo-Pakistan War 1965, which started with the assumption from the Pakistani side that post 1962 defeat of India from China, India is in a vulnerable position. So it will be good to open a um, uh, at least the side on Kashmir and attack Kashmir. And then it sort of, because the attack was offensive from Pakistan side and it ended in sort of a draw, uh, I, which was kind of a win from India, because India did not had any sort of objective in mind, and it was a defensive war from the side of India, right? And then and 1965, this act, which the Emergency Property Act of Pakistan, which got implemented in 1965, nonetheless was inhuman and stripped Hindus down to the level of enemy of the state. So before, Hindus were merely zimmis, right, second class citizen. But then now, I mean, post 1965, Pakistan, both east and west, they started to treat Hindus as the enemy of the state. Okay, and it actually writes like East Pakistan. So the provision of the Enemy Property Act 1965 of Pakistan. I'm going to read it now. Point A: East Pakistan Hindus who left before 6th of September 1965 are enemy of the state. Point B, properties associated with these people are to be declared enemy properties. Point C, government will appoint custodians to attach all the enemy properties and no transaction will be made in regard to such attachments. Point 4, in case there is a joint property owned by an enemy and a citizen of Pakistan, there will be partition of the properties, sorry, and the part belonging to the enemy will be attached to the government. This There is an exception to it as given in point 5, and point 5 says that in case the property is shared between an Indian Muslim and a non-enemy Pakistani citizen, no share of property is to be classified as enemy property, which means ki if two Muslims are sharing a property, it is not going to be partitioned. But if a Muslim and a Hindu are sharing a property, then it will be partitioned, and the Hindu's property, Hindu's part of the property, will be attached by the Pakistani government. And obviously, at the core of this Enemy Property Act was a weird Islamic fundamental, because Islam views all kafir, means non-Muslim men, women, children, and their properties as male ganimat or halal war booty, right? It is as prescribed and ordained in Surah Al Anfal, right? Lut Kamal is a chapter in Quran, so the so-called spiritual book for the Islamic faith, and it is no sin in Islam to capture, confiscate, or loot any of the above, which means the kafir women, children, during or after a jihad, as per the ayat 8.41 in Quran. Uh, and because Islam is perpetually at war with the Kafirs, in no position or period is it illegal to forcefully capture the properties of a Kafir, right? Because there is a perpetual war going on between Kafir and Muslims. So which means Islam is always at war. So at all time, these Kafir women and children, they become the Male Galimand, okay, loot Kamal. Um, and which means ki women, children are treated as properties, at least of the Kafir women, children, they are treated as properties in Islam. The Enemy Property Act is just a reflection of this peculiar worldview of an Islamic state. This is substantiated further by the fact that the religious fatwas were issued from West Pakistan asking Muslims to acquire Hindu properties and women by force as they were male ganimat. Okay, and the references for this event are given in my book, History of Hindu Misia and Hindu Genocide. There's this guy, Mr. Ali Ehsan Muhammad Mujahid, a leader in Dhaka, declared that all Hindu authored books should be burned and all official records and other such materials should be set on fire. This should be continued until all the Hindus of the Indian subcontinent are converted. Uh, so basically, they started to burn the books of Rabindranath and even Kaji Nazrul Islam, because they wanted to wipe off all records, right? The books, the literature, whatever Hindu side had, they wanted to burn them all, till the point, um, uh, till the point when Indian subcontinent, the whole of Indian subcontinent, are converted. And then August 9th, 1971, a Pakistan appointed committee in Dhaka declared a manifesto that includes point like point one, all Bengali writings of Hindus and literature influenced by Hindu culture, including that of poet Kaji Nazrul Islam, must be burned, as Nazrul gave his children Bengali Hindu names. So there is a very famous poet, other than Rabindranath Tagore, who is Kaji Nazrul Islam. And then Congress and Hindus tried to sort of portray him as the Muslim icon of sort of secularism, right? Quite justifiably, because Kaji Nazrul Islam wrote a lot of Shama Sangeet, which means the
Devotion
adulation
thing.
of Kali, yeah, Ma Kali. He wrote a lot of Sangeet, and he was a maestro when it come to Bengali poetry, right? And he gave his children name like Sabyasachi, which was a Hindu name. And because Kaji Nazrul Islam gave Hindu name to his sons, so they considered Kaji Nazrul Islam as kafir as well, and hence his properties behoved to be burned. Okay, and his literature behoved to be burned. The Hindu killer Razakar force should be paid through the confiscation of Hindu properties. So one of the motivation behind implementing the Enemy Property Act was to sort of ensure that these Razakar force who were committing genocide in East Pakistan at least, they get their funding by selling these Hindu properties. Okay, an Islamic organization named Khan Pir took over the property of a murdered Hindu professor Dr. Gobindo Chandra Dev in 1971, and it was never objected by the authorities. Okay. Needless to say, the Enemy Property Act brought down the de jure status of a Hindu in East Pakistan as being less than equal to a Muslim, and especially point 5, which says that um, especially point 5, which point 5 of the Enemy Property Act clearly indicate that the genocide of East Pakistan was essentially an Islamic design by the Pakistani government. Furthermore, it was Hindu genocide with a clear religious overtone, right? Those who are shocked by this brazen unabashedness with which such an Hindu phobic or Hindu mystic act was brought into motion must remember the speech of the then Prime Minister of Pakistan. Okay, so it was not that it was happening very randomly, but we must quote here the Prime Minister of Pakistan saying that, quote, the state will create such conditions that are conducive to the building up of a truly Islamic society. Islam lays down specific directions for social behavior and seeks to guide society in its attitude towards the problems which confront it from day to day. Islam is not just a matter of private belief or conduct, right? So this was obviously the whole Pakistani state was involved in this, and as a result, this Enemy Property Act in
Bijitda,
Pakistan
are you
dispossessed
audience?
Hindus.
Am I audible? To let me know. I think Bijitda has lost. Yeah, Bijitda, you are able to hear me?
Hello, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. We lost connectivity for a few seconds.
Huh, okay, so what I was saying ki it was not happening very randomly or in response to some war going on in 1965. The whole Pakistani state was sort of accomplice in this crime, and as a result, it's a. I mean, this Enemy Property Act is still being implemented in Bangladesh, for example. Um, and yeah, so it basically paved the path to Hindu jati vidhwans or Hindu genocide in both sides of Pakistan. I mean,
Yes.
even after throughout 1971, when East Pakistan effectively became a Hindu slaughterhouse, the Enemy Property Act was being actively used as a golden carrot to win over underprivileged Muslim middle class. It was announced that the confiscated property will be attached to all Badr and Razakar soldiers who were rampantly killing and raping Hindus without mercy. Even the so-called progressive liberal leader like Mujibur Rahman retained this vicious act and used it deliberately in his regime for the ethnic cleaning of the Hindus. So even after the partition of Pakistan to create Bangladesh, this act was not taken away, and it is still being used in Bangladesh to sort of dispossess Hindus of their properties. Yeah, so this was my brief sort of discussion on this
Yes.
topic.
So now, like the two things which I wanted to actually get your comment on. Okay. So there is a kind of consensus that when partition happened, correct? So Nehru wanted like few Muslims to remain in India, and Hindus to remain in Pakistan so that uh, the relationship could be actually better. It's like a kind of a hostage population being there as a kind of a bargaining point for future negotiations. Okay.
Right.
And second part is that we'll just shift for a few minutes to discuss what happened to properties of Muslims who actually went to Pakistan. So in 1954,
Hmm.
the Work Act was passed in India to actually
Right.
regulate. So what happened? People who actually left for Pakistan, they actually donated their properties to this work under Work Act, and they became so there was no government involved. There was a separate board
Exactly.
run by the
The
Muslims, and they
Waqf
would actually,
board. Right.
yeah.
So, right, yeah, this is another important point. Sorry, I forgot to sort of discuss this. So
Mhm.
you see, when the Hindus are coming back from Pakistan to India, their properties are being confiscated and attached by the government of Pakistan, right? And they effectively, because Pakistan is an Islamic state, those property became Muslim property, Islamic property, the property of Islam and Islamic State, right? I'm saying this because it at the time of partition, it was the two nation theory which was effectively playing its sort of move, right? So those properties of the Hindus who left Pakistan to come to India, those property of those Hindus became the properties of Islam. But the Muslims who went to Pakistan from India, their property, to take care of their property, the Waqf board was formed, I think in 1952 or 54, and
54,
there
54.
was a Waqf Act that got implemented, and so all those properties of those Muslims were basically owned by the Waqf board and not the Indian government. So this is basically showing you that um, I mean, both on both the side of India and Pakistan, uh, due to the exodus, the properties that were being contended became Islamic properties, right? Uh, which is so paradoxical. But this was the plan of the Congress as well as the Muslim League, right? So yeah, secularism at play.
Yes. So now we will come to the current circumstances where the act was actually amended in 2017, correct? Uh, yes. So now
Right,
we'll just,
2000.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. So this property, yeah, right. It was amended on 2017. Right. The bill was introduced in 2016.
2016, and it was amended in 17. Uh,
Right.
yeah. So just give us a little bit more into. So now, like the point we were actually discussing is that the unfinished agenda of partition actually still remains unfinished, and it's a kind of a lingering problem which has never been resolved. The properties which were there in India, in Pakistan, and Bangladesh, okay, the issue has not been resolved since independence, and end of the day, it is the Hindus who have faced brunt of the issues because the Indian government did not own them. Okay.
Right.
Since 47 and 71, there has been an apathy, a kind of apathy in terms of their plight, and they have never been given their rightful share when they came to India. Okay. In the erstwhile, it happened that in Bangladesh and in Pakistan, correct, the government actually enabled those people who actually came from India to Pakistan, they were actually helped to actually settle. Especially the case is of East Bengal. In East Bengal, nothing happened. So
Right.
the current leadership at that time in 47 and 71, okay, and the government of India and the state governments were actually just ignoring them for whatever reason we don't know. Okay, but we see the Muridhapi massacre happen. Okay,
Right.
we have we have seen people were settled in the Dandakaranya
Dandakarunya.
In Andaman,
Right.
which happened. Correct. So now, in this context, correct, why we are discussing this? We are discussing this because to actually, because a lot of people actually don't know about the 1954 Act, why it was created. Okay,
Right.
why in 1968 the Enemy Property Act was created. Okay, and what happened in between? Because the gap between 47, 54, and 68, that history is not read, known by a lot of people, and what actually really happened. So we are discussing this to actually give a bit of perspective, a historical perspective, the unfinished agenda which still remains unfinished, and trying to
Right.
shed more light on this. So yeah, so now we will just talk about, touch upon the 68th Act and the amendment in 50 in 16, and how actually it improves, how it actually gives a little bit more like justice to the Hindus itself, or to the state of India.
Right, right. I mean, so the Enemy Property Act of in India by Indian
68.
government in 1968 was sort of a reciprocal act to Pakistan's Enemy Property Act, but I
Hmm.
think it set the timeline before partition.
Hmm.
And all those people who migrated to, I think, yeah, I think it was during partition. I mean, there was some date given, I think, till 1952 or 1954, I guess. Whoever migrated to Pakistan before that day, their property will be attached through this act, can be
Hmm.
attached through this act.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And it is sort of a, you can see it is antithetical to the Waqf Act in a way, right? Because through this act you can really attach the property if you declare someone as the enemy of the state, of the Indian state, right? And in the case of Saif Ali Khan, it was this Abida Sultan, the eldest daughter of Hamidullah Khan, who migrated to Pakistan in 1950, and her property came to Saif Ali Khan because Abida Sultan moved to Pakistan before, I think, 1954. I mean, she moved in 1950. That's why that specific amount of property to Saif Ali Khan became enemy property, basically. Uh,
Yeah,
so
so there is a dichotomy. Dichotomy is that although the act was passed in 1968, correct, but it was a kind of a toothless tiger, because most of the
right,
properties were already under the Act in
work on
1954. Okay, so that act was a kind of a,
exactly,
like a
exactly. So consider the
spent shell.
situation.
Hmm.
Exactly. So consider the situation where this Abida Sultan, who moved to Pakistan, she consider the case where she donated. If she would have donated her property in the name of Waqf, then this sort of perplexing situation for the Saif Ali Khan would not have arrived, right? It is only because those properties were not donated to Waqf, and directly they came from this Abida Sultan to Saif Ali Khan. That's why this act can be sort of applied, and it is also being applied, I think, retrospectively, which some part, I mean, that's why sort of there is a dichotomy, and the court put a stay order for the longest time, I guess. Um, and because there was Congress government, who were obviously a very secular government, right, wanted to keep all the Nawabs and these people very happy, although they were, I mean, ardently anti-Indian. But anyway, now this is good that that sort of, I mean, see, the justice is taking place, right? The justice was due, and it is a lump sum amount of property that Indian government is trying to attach. So yes, I mean, I was quite surprised to know ki uh, this case opened up again, and I don't know whether it is going to be, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know that the judiciary, right? The milords in India, they are super secular. So we don't yet know, but it's glad to see these things are being discussed, because these are forgotten chapter in Indian history, and Hindus don't care and even don't care to care about these things. So it's good that these news are sort of occupying some space in the tabloid.
Yes. So, final question to you, and we have one question that we will take it. Okay. The final question to you is: do you think the Indian state has done justice to millions of refugees who came from East Pakistan and West Pakistan in 47 and also in 71 from East Pakistan? The Indian state has done justice to them that they deserved when they were actually fleeing persecution by not providing them the kind of relief which was provided them to the Muslims of India who went to Pakistan.
Right. Right. So let me start with that event. You know what, for example, our so-called, what do you call him? Bapuji, right? The father of the nation, right? He
MK
did to
Gandhi.
Hindus. Mohandas Gandhi, right? So Mohandas Gandhi, what happened? I think it was in 1947 winter. It was December, I guess. So slew of Hindus came from Pakistan to India, to Delhi, and there was no place to sort of host them, to keep them, right. So they sort of took refuge in a few masjids, which got vacant because a large section of population of Muslim from in Delhi, they migrated to Pakistan. Sorry. So large section of Muslim, they migrated to Pakistan. Those Delhi mosques were vacant. Hindus sort of took refuge there for a few days, and then Mohandas Gandhi was like, no, the Hindus cannot take refuge in those mosques, and they have to be, I mean, they have to be left, and they have to be vacated to sort of restore faith in secularism in India. So they literally vacated those Hindus in dire winter, right? In those Hindus who took refuge in those mosques, they literally came to street. And Mohandas Gandhi was happy because some abstract secularism was restored in the subcontinent at the time of partition. So that was one instant. And then the through the Nehru Liaquat Pact, that basically discriminated between the pre 1950 and post 1950 refugees. To say that I mean, Indian government would not rehabilitate the post 1950 refugees, which was very brutal from the Indian side, right? India for the longest time, or Bharat, has been the native land of Hindus, right? And those Hindus who became Udvastu or homeless in both the Pakistan, they lost their land in Pakistan, and then the Hindu majority India sort of disowned them as well. So those people had no option other than getting converted or dying helplessly, right. So it was a huge injustice that Indian state has done to Hindus by large. And in this way, so by doing this, first of all, the Indian state partitioned the Hindu consciousness of this land, right, then displaced them from their own native properties, and then got them killed. So it is a huge injustice, genocidal level of injustice that Indian state has done to Hindus in both side of Pakistan. Not only Hindus, like there are, I mean, Hindus, by Hindus I want to mean Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, and Jain. In my mind, they all are Hindus. And yes, Indian state has done gross injustice to all these communities, to tribal communities even who are also Hindus. But like, just imagine what happened to the side of Chattogram, for example. I mean, they are still being killed. Like, Bangladesh is sending army to kill those tribal people in Chatgaon, right? So, I mean, what to say? I don't know.
Exactly. Okay. So, yep. So what we will do is we have one question which is there from Retrowave. Okay. What were the primary reasons behind the partition of India, and were regions like Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab, and Bengal partitioned as a consequence of their strong patriotism and nationalism?
So for Bengal and Punjab, so one of the reasons was that I mean, at that time in 1930s, 1940s, in spite of huge vacuum in the leadership, after the split in Congress, and Congress could not manage to sort of hold up the national sentiment of this country overall, and it was slowly being grappled by Muslim League, um, specifically after the Lahore resolution to create Pakistan. um, I mean, the secular sort of response from Congress was not enough to dilute the imagination of Indian Muslims, to fragmentize India in the interest of creating Pakistan in various part of the subcontinent. Okay, and then communists were trying to sort of create, divide India into 18 different parts, and they came up with this thesis named Gangadhar Adhikari thesis, by Communist Party of India at that time. Anyway, so for Bengal and Punjab were partitioned due to the reason that at that time, other than the UP politics, the United Provinces politics, which is basically Uttar Pradesh politics, the quote unquote cow belt politics. Other than that, the other dominant sort of political voices were coming from Punjab, Bengal, and Maharashtra. Okay, these places were going through huge amount of reform at the post 1800, and because these places experienced 100 year of Hindu reform at least, and they were very bold in their political demand, in their overall voice, which were highly nationalist. Um, but it was not good for the interest of Congress, who were basically depending, at least for Nehru, who were depending on this, in this UP sort of style of politics, and whose politics was based on UP at that time. UP was called United Provinces again at that time, right?
Yes.
So Jawaharlal Nehru's interest was actually being served when Punjab and Bangla were being partitioned. In fact, he wanted the whole of Punjab and Bengal to go to Pakistan. He did not care because, as per Ram Manohar Lohia, who actually quoted Jawaharlal Nehru in his book Guilty Man of India's Partition, where Ram Manohar Lohia wrote that he was pretty surprised to know that Jawaharlal Nehru would let go Bengal, because Jawaharlal Nehru said that Bengal is a very muddy swamp place with lots of rivers. Humidity is bad there, so it could not be the mainland India. So Jawaharlal Nehru did not consider Bengal to be mainland India. So that's why he wanted to let it go. Um, uh, Also, you have to remember that, for example, Sindh was the part of the Bombay Presidency, but near 1930, after the 1930 census, uh, apparently the demography toppled. Okay, and in Sindh, suddenly Muslim became the majority. Okay, and when the Muslim side saw this, they gave the proposal to the British that you have to cut off the Sindh from the Bombay Presidency, which British did. And then when the election was fought there, Muslim League sort of dominated, and as a result, that Sindh went to Pakistan. There was no Sindhi voice, bold Sindhi voice in the politics, who sort of who could come to street and wreak havoc to split the Sindh, right? So unlike Punjab or Bengal, Sindh was not partitioned, and the Sindhi Hindus became again homeless in a way, right?
Yes. So let me give a second part of answer to your question. It's a very interesting question. Okay. Uh, this when we say correct in 19 I think 14 correct 1914 had the first World War.
Mm-hmm.
1914 1914 correct the first World War
Right,
happened.
1914. Right.
1914 the first World War happened. Okay, and then British knew that actually they will be losing their colonies, and we see like we were talking to Devjani Bhattacharya in the previous hour in our previous session. So she spoke about correct. So 1914. the British actually win the Second World War. Okay, they carve out. Okay, but they mostly knew that with the resurgence of independence movement in subcontinent, they will not be able to maintain their colonies in at least in South Asia, Indian
Right.
subcontinent. And that time in 1920, you had the Communist Party being formed. Okay, and
Right.
again you will see in from 1930 onwards, the Muslim League became a major force, political force. Okay. And at that time, we saw a crackdown on the freedom fighters from Maharashtra, Bengal, and in Punjab. So because the freedom fighters were there, they were primarily focused or concentrated in Punjab, Bengal, and Maharashtra.
Right.
So, so there was a concentrated effort by the British to actually suppress the freedom movement, okay, by whatever means possible, and create alternate political movements and narratives in the political front to actually create a kind of circumstances where the erstwhile British India, which included Burma, okay, and
Right.
including Burma, okay, it will become a kind of a Balkan state. So itself, Nehru wanted a linguistic division of the India before independence. So actually, Congress was in favor of creating linguistic countries within the Indian subcontinent, within the Indian Union, so that we would be having 20 countries in India rather than one unified India. So there was a lot at play when we talk about that because of only nationalist movements this happened. There are a lot of political, international, and other ideological things were there. We actually made sure. So the partition of India, which happened in 47, is a culmination of a lot of efforts by a lot of organizations, countries, and other forces which created this. So a lot of data is still to be
Right.
covered with something which is in the archives. People don't have it. There are also in the files of the secret organizations how it happened. So we'll not know
Right.
a lot, but the things are not as simple as having a one-line answer. So to answer that question to you.
Yeah, I think in some of the files that some Indian army officer recovered,
Hmm.
um, I forget his name, and he's saying that actually this partition, like the in Pakistan and Bangladesh in current form, this fragmented India, it
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
there with the British even near 1905. And in fact, in 1905, they tried to divide Bengal along this religious line. Obviously, this thing was there for a very long time. It was their plan indeed, right? And it was their plan ki before we leave the subcontinent, we are going to play this game at least. At least one game they had to play, and they successfully did it. And in fact, B.R. Ambedkar is writing in the Pakistan or the Partition of India that in fact it looked like the whatever crazy odious demand that Muslim League came up with, the British government took no time in fulfilling them, in fulfilling those odious demands. So obviously, and you know that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, for example, he was initially a nationalist, and he fought a large number of cases. For example, I think the case of Bhagat Singh he fought, right? In contrast, you know that during the discussion of the Gandhi Armin Pact, Gandhiji did not try to save Bhagat Singh from being hanged. So Jinnah was more nationalist than Gandhi, for example. But then Jinnah disappeared from the national polity and he went to Britain for 3 4 years. We don't know what happened there. And then he came back. He became a communal guy. Um, which was very sad and outrageous thing to see, right? Being a with being a Hindu, it must have been very hurtful. But yeah, this is the reality.
Yes. So I'll slightly diverge. Okay. So see, Jinnah was a Congressee, okay, and until he became non-Congressee, okay, he knew that if India became independent, he being Congressy, he will have the power, or he will have some role in the power. So he was advocating for a united India, not because he loved India, because he knew he would be playing a part in the power. And when he saw that okay, he will not have the power that he wanted, he went away. So
Right, but the other side of the fact is he was patriotic and nationalist and not a believer in two nation theory, at least not in
ah,
words, before leaving to London.
yes, correct,
Leaving
correct.
to
That
UK,
is
right? Yeah.
that is correct because he was like a British Brown Sahib. Even Nehru and Jinnah were the same. They are British Brown Sahib.
Right,
They
right.
have okay. So we'll take one more question. Okay. But isn't saying that British wanted to promote different movements to take the onus away from Muslims of the subcontinent and their inability to coexist with the no, because if you know the history, British took over the Indian subcontinent from Marathas, not from the Mughals. You need to read
Exactly.
your history. Read history that Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last emperor of India or Mughal, okay, he was actually his kingdom was 1 kilometer of the Delhi. Okay, the whole India, bulk of India was actually controlled by the Marathas, and British took over from Marathas, not from the Mughals. That's first thing, and second thing is from 1800 onwards, when the Bankim Chandra wrote Andamat, and that became a platform on which the Hindutva movement came about. Okay, and Bengal, Punjab, and Maharashtra were the primary focal point of this. It was British was fighting primarily the Hindus, not the Muslims, because if you see, there was no significant contributions of the Muslim polity towards anti-British things. It was
Correct.
only the Indians, the Hindus, were fighting the British, and you can find this in the Ambedkar's book as well. So that is one point. Okay, and the last point I'll take, and we'll finish this thing, is that the British just capitalized on the existing sentiments. They actually created the sentiment. So if you see the 1920, the Communist Party of India is formed. Okay, to actually see British wanted, because British knew that with the British being able to actually being there for 200 years, Calcutta and actually Bombay were primary centers of trade and industry. So Calcutta and Mumbai both were there, and also some part in Gujarat. And British wanted to actually destroy the economy of a fledgling nation who would actually gain independence. So British actually invested to create the Communist Party in 1920, and also invested to create the communal division with Jinnah to actually make sure that we will have a limping India being born in 47 rather than a confident India. In, so this labor movements, communist movements were part of this to actually make sure that the industry, whatever were there, they would be crippled so that the India will not have the money to actually run itself.
Right, right. Yeah. You have to remember Calcutta at that time was probably the second biggest capital
Second,
of the British Empire after
yes,
London.
yes,
And
okay.
also to sort of substantiate the point that British tried to collude with the Ashraf and the Muslim polity to rule the majority Hindus. In fact, it is reflected in the writing of this guy William Wilson Hunter, um, who basically was a member of the Indian Civil Service. So basically, he was an ICS officer. In modern term, he was an IAS officer who studied India and who wrote extensively on the contemporary administrative policies, statics, history, geography, and societies of India from 1869 to 1881. Because he wanted to understand India in order to be able to sort of craft the administrative policies. And he's writing here. So, after the 1857, the monopolization of Ashraf got diminished within 100 years, right? So in 1757, for example, 1707 was the demise of Aurangzeb, And 100 years after that, pretty much India became Hinduized again. The political power of Islam got diminished within a century, right? And for example, when the British East India Company captured the most part of the Indian subcontinent in 1850 by 1857, and then the rule of the Queen was sort of enacted, right, post 1857. Then, from the data of distribution of state power patronage in Bengal, April 1871, we get to know that the ratio of Hindus to Muslim in important positions in the different offices became reduced to 7:1. Okay. And in terms of medical officers, in all those posts, literally there were zero Muslims. Okay. And which basically got the British Empire afraid because they wanted to give some amount of representation to Muslims as well. But Muslims are not eager to sort of take over those positions because, the modern sort of medicine and all those practices were haram in Islam. Now, but that was not enough for British to be contended with, right? So here W. Hunter is writing the truth that our system of public instructions, which has awakened the Hindus from the sleep of centuries and quickened their inert masses with some of the noble impulses of a nation, is opposed to the traditions, unsuited to the requirement, and hateful to the religion of the Musliman. And then he goes on to write that, and here he writes, is it that the Hindus have all along been better men than the Muslims and only required a fair field in order to outstrip them in the race? Or is it that the Muslims have so many careers open to them in non-official life that they are indifferent to government employment? कि government employment में आ क्यों नहीं रहे हैं ना Muslims? Um, and then he writes that the truth is that when the country passed under a rule, the Muslims were the superior race, and superior not only in stoutness of heart and strength of arm, but in power of political organization and in the science of practical government. Matlab, because they can be politically united and they have the sense of practical governance, that's why Muslims are to be given more posts. And furthermore, the British identified three key shortcomings in the Hindu society. Point one, Hindus do not have political unity. Point two, Hindus are not brave and wise enough in their political demands. Point three, Hindus do not have practical knowledge of how to govern a country. So ब्रिटिश आर कंटिन्यूअसली सॉर्ट ऑफ आर्ग्यूइंग कि काफी सारे हिंदू ऑफिसर्स बन रहे हैं बट उनको बनने नहीं देना है वो जगह मुस्लिम्स को देना है to give better representations to them, and then in the process they created people like Sayyid Ahmed Khan, for example, right, who again promoted and popularized the two nation theory in different speeches, specifically in his infamous Mirat speech, right? So this thing was going on, and Hindus sort of had no idea ki what was the vile plan of the British. British played the game very well, so to say.
Yes, yes. We'll take last question and then we'll call it a day today. Why did Nehru play along? He literally cleaned off the Hindu leadership while mentoring the likes of Jyoti Basu.
Right, right. Because he knew कि Hindus are politically divided, first of all. So if he can ensure the Muslim vote bank, who are sort of petrified after the partition, the Muslims in India, कि something bad is going to happen to them, given their karma. So he focused on ensuring the Muslim vote bank. Again, like he saw the pattern in which the British were ruling, right? And then there is another point which is said, but I don't believe in it. Ki there were by then again 50, 55 countries, right? Islamic countries. So he had to be a little bit careful in his administrative policies. Um, and obviously India had too many fault lines. Uh, and again genocides and riots were going on here and there, so he had to be careful. That's why he played along the Islamic appeasement, at least to
Mhm.
appease one fraction of the Indian society.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you like nobody asked him to do any favors to Hindus, but why he would let millions be slaughtered in Pakistan and Bangladesh? What was the? I don't see the logic behind that.
Right, right. Because he said that I am born a Muslim, I am born a Hindu, but in my heart I am Muslim, and in my brain I am British, something like that. And in the discovery of India, he quoted something which actually shows his hatred for Hinduism. Uh, just give me a second. I want to quote that. It is very important in the context of our discussion. Uh, right. I think I have that. Come on. Just yes. So here is Jawaharlal Nehru in his book The Discovery of India. And if you buy the Penguin books, it is page number 225. Um, where he's saying ki I am myself repelled by much in India. Naturally, for I am an Indian and I cannot easily hate myself. However, unworthy I may be. And then he basically he's agreeing to some Oswald Sitwell's comment that the Indian art or the Hindu art is repulsive, greasy qualities and so often mars the Hindu work of art. Matlab, Hindu work of art is repulsive and greasy and dirty. And Oswald Sitwell is commenting on Hindu work of art in a very pejorative term, but I am accepting to it because I am also repelled by Hindu art and architecture, but I cannot openly express it because I am an Indian and I cannot easily hate myself. So inside his mind, he was a very zimmy guy. He was a very insecure, Macaulay Putra, right? That might have impacted the policies that he were adopting at that time. Maybe he was adopting them out of fear and out of zimmihood, not out of bravery. Quite
Yes,
evidently.
yeah. So as the book, there's a book by Kunad Els, Decolonizing the Hindu Mind. Okay, so a colonized mind will do all these things out of fear or out of choice, and we'll
Hmm.
never know whether it was choice or out of fear.
Right.
Yes, so we'll end this program today. I think this was important to actually understand because most people, even I, did not know the complications which are there in 1968 Any Properties Act because we all forgot about it. So it was a good refresher in historical context. What is that act? What it's all about? And how actually it impacted a lot of people, including people who came from West Pakistan and came from East Pakistan in 47
Right.
as well as in 71.
Right.
So thank you,
And
Bijitda.
I have discussed the whole thing primarily from this book, from my book that I have written, History of Hindu Myths and Hindu Genocides. And you can get this book from Amazon. And other than this, it has quoted pretty much all the Hindu hating and Hindu genocidal events that have happened on the soil of India. And yeah, so I have referred to my book for all these
Yes.
discussions.
So
Yes.
if you want to know more about it, this historical context, then you can get this book so that you will
Right.
know exact dates, time, people, quotes. Okay. So
Right. Yeah.
yes. So thank you everyone. Thank you Bijitda for coming. So we
Thank
will
you.
again see you on Saturday.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So
With
thank
some
you.
new
Jai Shri
topic.
Ram. Yeah, Jai
Jai
Shri
Shri
Ram.
Ram.
Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram.